Course corrected. Execute change now.
The first thing Commander Adele Marsh heard when she stepped onto the bridge was a man telling the crew she would get them killed. He did not whisper it. Lieutenant Commander Roy Thorne stood near the chart table with his back half turned to her, voice pitched to carry, and he let the words land in front of 11 sailors who had not yet decided what they thought of their new commanding officer. "I've sailed 30 years, Thorne said. I have never once seen a woman hold a bridge in heavy water, and we are running into heavy water." Marsh did not stop walking. She set her cover down on the ledge, took the chart in both hands, and read it the way a surgeon reads a wound. The transport was 4 hours out, loaded, riding low, pushing into a corridor of open ocean that the forecast had already started to lie about. Hold on, that. The forecast was already lying. "Mr. Thorne," she said without looking up, "your last bearing puts us 8 degrees off the safe lane. Correct it." Thorne almost smiled. "The lane's fine." "It is not." She turned the chart so the bridge could see the smear of the low-pressure front bending toward them. "Come left. Now." He took his time. He corrected the heading like a man humoring a child, and 90 seconds later the deck heeled hard as the first real swell came through exactly where her old bearing would have put the bow broadside, ugly, the kind that throws coffee off a table and doubt into a room. Nobody said anything, but every sailor on that bridge had just watched her be right. Thorne recovered fast. Men like Thorne always do. He gripped the rail, steadied himself, and turned the moment into a joke before the deck had even settled. "Lucky Red," he said to the helmsman, loud enough, even a broken clock. The helmsman, a kid named Pace, maybe 22, laughed because he did not know what else to do. That was the thing Marsh understood that Thorne did not. A crew in rough water does not follow rank. It follows confidence. And Thorne was handing out confidence like it was his to give. She let it go, not because she was weak, because she was counting. Read that again. She let it go on purpose. A commander who fights every insult in the first hour has nothing left for the hour that matters. Marsh knew which hour was coming. She moved to the chart table and began marking the front by hand. In pencil, the old way, isobars, drift, the ascent of the current against the hull. Thorne watched her do it and shook his head. "We have radar for that, Commander." "Radar tells you where you are," Marsh said. "It does not tell you where the sea is going." Master Chief Eli Booker, standing by the aft hatch, heard that. He had served under 9 commanders. He did not say a word. But he stopped looking at her like a problem and started looking at her like a question. Outside, the horizon had gone the color of a bruise. The storm did not arrive. It assembled. First, the light changed, that hard, flat, colorless glare that comes off water just before weather. Then the wind shifted aft and started to moan in the superstructure, a low note you felt in your teeth before you heard it in your ears. The transport began to pitch, bow rising and slamming, each impact sending a shudder down the length of the hull and up through the souls of everyone on the bridge. Marsh stood with her feet planted and her hand light on the chart table. She was not bracing. She was reading the ship through her boots, the rhythm of it, the way it recovered from each wave, the half-second hesitation that told her the load below was shifting. "Mr. Thorne, have the load secured below decks re-inspected. The cargo is working." "It's lashed. It is moving. I can feel it." She finally looked at him directly. "Re-inspect it, or I will send someone who will." For the first time, Thorne hesitated, not because he believed her, because Booker had quietly stepped to the hatch, waiting to carry the order whether Thorne liked it or not. The old chief had picked a side without announcing it. Thorne sent the team below. They came back 10 minutes later with their faces wrong. 2 lashings had already parted. In another hour in this sea, the cargo would have come loose and rolled, and a transport that loses its load in heavy water does not roll back upright. Marsh had felt it through her feet before any instrument on the ship could see it. The barometer was still falling. By the time full dark came, the sea had stopped being water and become geography, moving hills, black valleys, ridges of foam that rose higher than the bridge windows and fell away into nothing. The barometer was lower than anyone aboard had ever personally seen it. Pace at the helm had both hands locked on the wheel, and his knuckles had gone white. Two officers near the radar repeater were arguing in low, fast voices about turning back, about a port that was now too far behind them to reach before the worst of it. Thorne's voice cut across them, and this time the bravado had thinned. "We should have never come this far. She pushed us in here." That was the moment. Marsh heard her own competence being rewritten, in real time, into the reason they were all about to die. It is a particular kind of cold, watching a man build the story he will tell if you fail, building it out loud in front of the people whose nerve you need. She did not argue. Arguing would have made it a debate, and a debate would have split the bridge in half right when it needed one spine. Instead, she walked to the center of the bridge where every face could see her, and she put one hand flat on the chart and one hand on the back of the helmsman's chair. "Listen to me," she said, quiet, even. "We are not turning broadside in this. We are going to take it on the bow, and we are going to ride it. I have done this before. You have not. So you are going to do exactly what I say, exactly when I say it." The bridge went still, and then the main navigation console flickered, stuttered, and died. A console dying in a storm is not a quiet thing. The screen went black, then the backup chimed an alarm nobody wanted to hear, and for 3 full seconds the bridge was just the sound of the sea trying to come in. Pace's voice cracked. "Commander, I've lost the readout. I've got nothing." "You have me," Marsh said. "Eyes on the bow. Call the waves. That is your only job now." She was already at the chart table, not the dead screen, the paper, the hand-drawn charts she'd marked an hour earlier, when Thorne told her radar was enough. Now the radar was a black mirror, and the pencil lines were the only navigation left on the ship. Read that again. The thing he mocked her for was the only thing still working. Booker came up beside her without being called. "Master Chief," she said low, "I need the helm taken off auto and rigged for manual. We are going to steer this by hand and by feel. Can your people do that?" "My people can do that, ma'am." He said ma'am the way some men say amen. Behind them, Thorne stood at the dead console, staring at it as if it might come back to life and save his version of the night. It would not. If you have ever watched someone realize, too late, that the person they wrote off is the only one who knows the way out, tell me in the comments the exact second you saw it on his face, because the whole bridge saw it now. Marsh put her finger on the chart on a single penciled line and traced the only path through. Manual steering in a sea like that is a conversation between 3 things: the wave, the wheel, and the half second of warning you get between them. Marsh ran it like a relay. Pace called the waves from the bow. "Big one, fine on the port bow, coming." And she translated each call into an order, and Booker's helmsman fed it into the wheel. And the ship answered late, the way a loaded transport always answers late, heavy and reluctant and a beat behind. The trick was to give the order before the wave arrived, to steer the ship to where the sea would be, not where it was. Radar tells you where you are. It does not tell you where the sea is going. She had said that hours ago like a small thing. It was not a small thing. She kept one hand on the paper chart, anchoring every order to the line she had drawn. and the bridge slowly stopped being a room full of frightened men and started being an instrument she was playing, not because they trusted her yet, because she was the only voice in the dark that was not afraid. Thorne tried once to put his hands on it. "You're cutting it too fine, you'll broach her." "Mr. Thorne." She did not raise her voice. "You have the deck log. Write down every order I give and the time I give it. If I am wrong, you will have the proof. Until then, you are a pen." He stood there a moment. Then he picked up the pen. The next wall of water was already building, and this one was bigger than anything that had come before. It came out of the dark like a cliff deciding to move. Pace saw it first, and his voice went up an octave. "Wave, big, dead ahead. It's huge." And then he ran out of words because there is no number for the one that fills the whole window. Marsh felt the whole bridge lean toward panic. One man near the radar said, "Oh God," out loud. Another reached for the radio to call Mayday. They had no time to finish. Fear in a closed room moves faster than water. I will tell you something I have learned about command, and then I will get back to the wave. The job is not to feel no fear. The job is to be the one place in the room where fear cannot vote. That is all it is. That is the whole thing. Everyone on that bridge was afraid. She just refused to let it touch her hands. "Meet it," she said. "Helmsman, come right, 5 degrees. Take it on the bow. Ahead 2/3 now. We climb it, we do not let it climb us." The bow rose and kept rising until the deck was a ramp and men grabbed for anything bolted down until the whole ship pointed at the black sky, and then it crested, hung for one weightless, sickening second at the top, and came down the back of the wave hard enough to shake fillings loose. Water exploded over the bow and slammed the bridge windows like a fist, but they were still pointed the right way, still on the line. And Thorne, pen in hand, had just written down an order that worked. They climbed the next one and the one after that, and somewhere in there the bridge changed. It was not a speech, nobody clapped. It happened in the orders, in the half second, faster that Pace started calling the waves, in the way Booker began to anticipate her and have the helmsman's hands already moving, in the way 2 officers who had been arguing about turning back now stood at the windows calling out the sea like spotters. The crew had stopped waiting to be saved and started helping save themselves. That is what command actually looks like when it works. Not one hero, one person steady enough that everyone around her remembers they are not helpless. Then the engine room called up. Flooding in a forward compartment, a seam working under the pounding, water coming in faster than the pumps liked. A lesser bridge would have come apart at that. This one looked to Marsh. "How bad?" she said into the handset, calm as a weather report. The answer was bad. Bad enough that the safe and easy version of this story does not survive the next 20 minutes. She made the call in 4 seconds. Counter flood to balance her, slow to bear steerage and ride it. We do not fight the flooding and the sea at the same time. We pick one. Tonight we picked the sea. It was a gamble, deliberately taking on water to keep the ship from rolling, trusting the pumps to hold the rest. The wrong call sinks them. She made it without blinking. Booker looked at her, and for the first time that night, the old chief almost smiled. "Heard, ma'am," he said. "Counter-flooding now." Thorne broke at the worst possible moment. It was not cowardice, exactly. It was 30 years of being the man who knew, colliding with one night where he did not. The counter-flooding order had the ship sitting lower, sluggish, and to a man who had never done it, lower felt like sinking. He let go of the chart table and crossed the bridge in 3 steps. "You're drowning us on purpose." His voice cracked across the room. "She's flooding the ship. Somebody get on the radio. Get us a tow. Get us anything." and the bridge wobbled. Pace's eyes came off the bow. The officer at the radio half reached for it. One panicking man with rank can do more damage in 10 seconds than the sea does in an hour, because the sea cannot talk. Marsh did not flinch. "Master Chief," she said, "relieve Lieutenant Commander Thorne of the deck and put him on the lee side. He is done giving orders tonight." Booker moved before Thorne could answer, a wall of a man with one hand firm on Thorne's shoulder. "This way, sir." Not cruel. Final. Then Marsh raised her voice for the first time all night, not in fear, in command, the kind that fills a room and leaves no corner for doubt to hide in. "Eyes on the bow! Helmsman, hold your line! We are riding this through, and we are bringing this ship home, every man on it. Bushtet, do your jobs." They did, and the strange thing, the thing nobody would say out loud until later, was that the bridge felt safer the moment the loudest man on it stopped talking. What no one on that bridge knew was that Commander Marsh had stood in a night exactly like this one before. 11 years earlier, a junior officer on a different ship, she had watched a captain freeze in heavy weather, watched a good man's nerve fail, and a deck full of sailors pay for it. She had sworn that night that if she ever held the chair, fear would never be the thing steering her ship. She had gone and earned every heavy weather qualification the service offered. She had asked for the hard postings other officers avoided. She had become quietly exactly the commander tonight required, and nobody had bothered to read the file before deciding she did not belong. If this is hitting you the way it should, then you already know the kind of person we are talking about. The one who does the unglamorous work for years, so that on the worst night, the work is simply there. If you want this channel to keep telling stories about people like her, the pinned comment is where you keep it alive. The ship groaned. The flooding had slowed. The counterflood was holding. The pumps were winning by inches. The gamble was paying, but the sea was not finished. Out in the dark ahead, the storm had been saving its worst for last, and the barometer, impossibly, had begun to fall again. The center of the storm came down on them at the blackest hour of the night. The wind stopped moaning and started screaming, a sound with no bottom to it. The waves lost their rhythm. Instead of a line of hills marching in order, the sea turned into chaos, walls coming from two directions at once, slamming the hull from angles that no helmsman could read in time. Pace called what he could, but even his voice had gone ragged, and there were waves now that no one saw until they hit. Marsh stepped to the wheel herself. She did not take it from the helmsman to show off. She took it because there is a kind of steering that lives in the hands and cannot be ordered through a third person fast enough. The feel of the rudder loading, the half-second of slack before the bow answers, her hands closed on the spokes, wet and cold, and she steered the ship the way you walk a frightened animal through fire, firm, certain, never letting it sense your own fear through your palms. I will say this plainly, and then I will stop talking about it. There are people who want the title, the chair, the credit. And there are people who, when the night turns black and the screaming starts, simply put their hands on the wheel because someone has to, and it had better be the one who knows how. She never once asked to be admired. She only asked to bring them home. For 2 hours, she held it. 2 hours by feel, by the pencil line, by nerve, and then, far off the bow, low on the black horizon, a light. The light was the outer marker, home. Nobody cheered. They were too far gone for that, too hollowed out by hours of holding on. But something moved through the bridge, a long, shaking breath let out by a dozen men at once. The sound of a crew that had privately made peace with not seeing morning and was now impossibly going to see it. The sea did not let go all at once. It eased the way a fever breaks in stages, the waves slowly remembering their order, the wind dropping from a scream to a moan, to something you could almost speak over. Marsh kept her hands on the wheel until the swells came down to something a helmsman could manage, and only then did she step back. "You have her," she told Pace. The kid took the wheel with hands that had stopped shaking somewhere in the last hour without his noticing. She walked to the chart table. The hand-drawn chart was still there, soaked, the pencil lines smeared but readable, the single line she had traced through the whole night still visible under the salt water, and the thing Thorne had called unnecessary. She rested 2 fingers on it for a moment, not for the crew, who were not watching, but for herself. Over on the lee side, Lieutenant Commander Thorne sat where Booker had put him hours ago, and he had not said a word in a very long time. He was about to learn what the rest of the night cost him. The harbor at dawn was flat and gray, and the most beautiful thing any of them had ever seen. The transport came in slow, riding low from the water still in her, scarred down one side where the sea had torn away a section of railing, but afloat, every compartment accounted for, every man aboard alive. Word had gone ahead. A ship does not vanish off the board for 9 hours in a storm like that and then call in from the outer marker without people on the pier already knowing something had happened out there. So they were waiting. Harbor staff, the duty officers, a small knot of senior brass who had been pulled from their beds when the transport stopped answering and had spent the night assuming the worst. They stood at the edge of the pier in the cold light and watched a ship that should not have come back. On the bridge, Marsh straightened her uniform. It was soaked through and salt-stained, and she did not care. She had not slept. Her hands ached from the wheel. She gave the order to bring the ship alongside, and Booker relayed it. And Pace, 22 years old and 10 years older than he had been yesterday, eased the transport against the fenders, soft as a kiss. "Lines over," Booker called. And on the pier, the waiting brass started to understand what they were looking at. Here is the detail that changes everything about who got the credit. When the brow came down and the senior officers came aboard, they did not come for Commander Marsh first. They came for the deck log, the official, time-stamped record of every order given on that bridge through the worst of the night. Standard procedure after a casualty like this. They wanted to know who had been steering and how and whether what was done was sound. And the deck log was in Lieutenant Commander Thorne's handwriting, every order, every time stamp. "Come right, 5 degrees, take it on the bow. Counter flood to balance, ride it. Hold your line, bring her home." Page after page of the exact decisions that had kept a loaded transport off the bottom of the ocean, and all of it written down hour by hour in the hand of the man who had stood on that same bridge and told the crew a woman would sink them. He had been made to write the proof himself. The senior officer, reading it, looked up from the log, looked at Thorne, looked at Marsh, and understood the whole night in about 4 seconds. You could see it move across his face. "Commander Marsh gave these orders?" he asked quietly. Booker answered before anyone else could. "Every one of them, sir. By hand at the wheel for 2 hours in the dark. I was standing next to her." What happened next was not loud, and that is exactly why it landed so hard. The senior officer closed the log. He turned to face the bridge crew, the exhausted, salt-crusted men standing along the bulkhead, and he asked them simply, "Is that account accurate?" And one by one they said yes. Pace first, voice unsteady. "Yes, sir, she brought us in." Then the officer who had reached for the panic radio. Then the engine room chief who had counter-flooded on her word. Then Booker, who did not need to add anything but did. "There is not a man on this ship who'd be standing here without her, sir. I have watched silence win more fights than shouting ever did, and I have rarely seen it win one like this. Because Thorne was standing right there, and every yes was a sentence handed down without a single voice raised against him. Nobody pointed at him. Nobody had to. The crew was not accusing the man who doubted her. They were simply telling the truth, and the truth left him no room to stand in. He had spent the first hour of the storm telling 11 men she would get them killed. Now those same 11 men were telling an admiral she was the only reason they were alive, and he had written it all down himself. Thorne's face did the thing arrogance always does when the truth finally arrives. It drained. The certainty went out of it. 30 years of I know better collapsing in front of the very crew he had tried to turn. He did not argue. There was nothing left to argue with. He just got smaller, standing in the gray morning light while the room recalculated around him. The senior officer stepped in front of Commander Marsh. For a moment, he just looked at her. The soaked uniform, the exhaustion, the steadiness that had not left her even now. Then in front of the brass and the crew and the man who had written her orders into the log, he came to attention and saluted her. It was not ceremony. A salute given on a pier at dawn by a senior officer to a junior one after a night like that is not protocol. It is a verdict. It said, in the only language the service has, you were right, and we were lucky to have you, and everyone here is going to know it. Marsh returned it. Crisp, no expression of triumph. That was never her way. Just the quiet acknowledgement of someone who had done the job she had spent 11 years preparing to do, and had no need to be told she had done it. Behind her, the crew straightened, and then raggedly at first, and then all together. They came to attention, too, for her. 22-year-old Pace, with tears cutting clean lines down his salt-stained face. The men who had laughed at Thorne's joke about the broken clock 16 hours ago in another life. The whole pier was saluting the woman they had been warned would sink them, and Thorne stood off to the side, unsaluted, unspoken to, watching the respect he had tried to deny her arrive all at once from everyone, with him on the outside of it. Commander Adele Marsh did not give a speech. The crew was dismissed to dry clothes and hot food and the long sleep of men who had been certain they would die and had not. The brass moved off to write their reports. The pier began to empty in the gray morning, and the storm that had nearly taken them was already just a line of dark cloud running away to the east. Harmless now, somebody else's problem. She went back up to the bridge alone. The hand-drawn chart was still on the table where she had left it, stiff and warped from the salt water, the pencil lines blurred but holding. She picked it up. The single line she had traced through the whole black night was still there, running corner to corner across the paper, the path that had brought a crippled ship and 40 souls home through water that should have swallowed them. She folded it once, carefully, and put it inside her jacket, not for a report, for herself. Then she rested her hand on the wheel one last time, the spokes dry now, still, ordinary in the daylight, the same wheel she had held for 2 hours by feel and nerve while a man on the lee side told everyone she would kill them. Lieutenant Commander Thorne never sailed under her again. He did not have to be transferred or charged or shamed in front of a board. The deck log did all of it in his own handwriting, and the story of that night traveled the way the best stories on a base always do, faster than any official report and harder to forget. Wherever Thorne went after that, the night arrived before him, the man who wrote down every order proving she belonged on the bridge, and the crew. Years later, the ones who had been there still told it the same way, without changing a word. Not the storm, not the flooding, not the waves taller than the bridge. They told it like this. We had a captain once who took the wheel when the screaming started and put us all ashore, and never once raised her voice except to save us. They told us she'd sink the ship. She brought every man home.